What if the life you keep waiting for is already waiting inside you, not as a distant prize, but as a field of possibility that responds when you stop feeding yesterday's chemistry? This is a simple teaching. It is precise enough to practice today, and humble enough to be an experiment rather than a promise. If you want to begin rewriting your entire reality, the place to begin is not with events outside you. It is with where you place your attention and how you train your body to feel a future that has not yet occurred. We will speak plainly, but with depth. Imagine a voice that is part scientist, part old teacher, clear about mechanisms, reverent about mystery. Think of it as an archetypal teaching, a method that borrows both from modern neuroscience and from the older language of inner practice. Call it whatever naming helps you engage. The method itself is what matters. The familiar trap, living in yesterday. Most people live inside a replay. Not literally. They get up, they work, they laugh, they grieve. But internally, their nervous system, chemistry, and attention habitually recreate patterns from the past. A thought triggers an emotion. That emotion triggers a cascade of hormones and autonomic responses. Those biochemical states then prompt behaviors that reinforce the original thought pattern. Over and over, the body records what is normal. It learns a set of feelings and calls that home. We don't usually think of this as addiction in the classic sense, yet it functions like one. Addiction is merely a repeated attraction to a specific chemistry. In the case of emotional addiction, the substance is a state, anxious anticipation, familiar resignation, the adrenaline of busyness, the safe enclosure of complaint. Your nervous system prefers the known chemistry because it is predictable. Even change that could be better is often experienced as danger by the body because anything new disrupts the patterns that have been encoded as self. Here is the central implication. If your body is wired to recreate the past, your personality, the composite of thinking, feeling, and acting, will keep producing outcomes that look like the past. To change outer results, you must change inner habit, not eventually, but now. A simple observation with deep ramifications. Attention sculpts reality. Attention is the sculptor's hand. Where you place it, you build. You can imagine attention as an instrument that organizes energy. When attention is stuck on a past event or on a felt lack, the chemistry of that focus becomes the substrate from which actions and decisions spring. Conversely, if attention is deliberately moved toward an imagined future and is accompanied by coherent feeling, you begin to lay down a different pattern in the body. This is not magic language. It is a description of a mechanism we can study. Neural networks that fire together, wire together. Autonomic states recruit endocrine cascades. Repeated imagined rehearsal of an action increases the motor representation of that action. The same is true for emotional rehearsal. When we repeatedly imagine the feeling of being healthy, confident, or loved, the body gradually learns those chemistries as possible baselines. We must be careful here. This is an invitation to experiment, not a medical directive. No one should abandon medical care because of an inner practice. What follows is a framework for training attention and physiology, an experimental method to test whether your inner world can lead to different outer outcomes. The structure of the problem, the personality loop. To make this practical, hold in mind a loop with 5 stations: thought, feeling, chemistry, behavior, memory. Thought evokes a feeling. Feeling organizes body chemistry. Chemistry influences action. Action creates experience. Experience records memory. Memory, in turn, biases future thought. The loop is self-sustaining. Most people try to change outcomes by altering the behavior station. They will work harder, plan differently, adopt new habits. Behavior matters, but if behavior is enacted from the same old feeling state and chemistry, those new actions are overlaid on the same foundation and will tend to revert. The more effective change occurs when we interrupt the loop earlier, at the thought and feeling stages, and deliberately rehearse a different internal state so that the body begins to expect and then behave from that new state. A short anecdote to feel the shape of this. A person sits alone late at night beside a small fire. The life they know, the small rituals, the familiar disappointments, plays behind their chest like a worn film. Then, in a quiet imaginative movement, they call to mind a version of themselves who has navigated those difficulties and is living in a slightly different way. They don't begin by listing goals. They first invite a felt sense, the posture, the calm, the steadiness, the particular gratitude of that future person. Over weeks, that rehearsal reshapes the body. Decisions begin to follow from a different felt place. This is not dramatic in the moment, it is subtle, but the accumulation is what matters. If you want different results, you must become a different person in felt experience before action. How the brain and waves fit into the picture. There are practical brain states that map to modes of experience. Think of them as ladder rungs rather than compartments. High beta states correspond to focused external attention, often with heightened stress. Alpha and theta states are more inward. They are conducive to imagination, suggestion, and memory reconsolidation. Gamma is associated with integrative, coherent processing, moments of deep insight or unity. Delta is the deep restorative wave of sleep. The key for deliberate change is to spend time in the brain states that make rehearsal effective. If you're in perpetual high beta, anxious, scanning, reactive, you are less able to access the imaginative, receptive quality necessary to plant new patterns. A shift into alpha theta allows the brain to be more receptive to rehearsal. Sustained, coherent activity, moving toward gamma rhythms in some practitioners, appears correlated with integration across neural networks. Again, these are correlates and levers, not magical guarantees. The brain's rhythms offer windows of greater plasticity. The goal of practice is to systematically access those windows and hold a coherent internal experience there long enough that the body begins to rewrite its memory. The heart as more than an organ, a regulator of coherence. Modern physiology recognizes that the heart communicates to the brain in many ways, through neural pathways, hormonal signals, and variations in pulse timing. When the heart's rhythm becomes more ordered, a state often described as coherence, the system as a whole shifts. Practically, cultivating heart coherence helps regulate the autonomic nervous system, making it easier to move out of reactive patterns and into a state that supports rehearsal and intentional change. In practice, this means learning to generate a felt emotion in the heart center, gratitude, appreciation, unconditional acceptance, and sustaining it. Not as a forced image, but as a felt tone that stabilizes the nervous system. The felt heart state acts like a thermostat. It sets a new internal climate in which attention can be trained. The pineal, CSF mechanics, and the idea of an internal antenna. There is a small gland sitting deep behind the forehead that has fascinated both mystics and scientists. The pineal gland interacts with cerebrospinal fluid and may influence cycles of attention, sleep, and subtle timing. Some describe it metaphorically as an antenna or timepiece, a way the system gauges transitions between states. Several practical breathing techniques subtly influence CSF movement and the sensations around the crown of the head, which many practitioners experience as a shift in attention. I emphasize this carefully. The language here is intentionally poetic because the mechanisms are complex and not yet fully mapped. What is useful for practice is a safe, gentle way to draw attention upward, toward the crown, while sustaining heart coherence and a broadened breath. Small, controlled shifts in cranial pneumatics and CSF dynamics, induced by gentle breath patterns and postural alignment, can feel like opening a channel of attention. This, combined with heart coherence, is a practical lever to move into receptive brain states. Field versus matter, creating from wave, not particle. One of the most useful metaphors is the distinction between creating from the field and creating from matter.
Creating from matter is what most people do. They look at lack and chase objects or events to fix it. Creating from the field means beginning in the wave, the pattern of possibility, and letting the particle outcomes fall into place. Imagine dropping a seed pattern into a pond. The initial wave organizes the water. Later, matter arranges itself into eddies that reflect that pattern. When you begin from the feeling, the wave, you are not denying material planning. You are simply setting the organizing principle first. The paradox is that when you truly inhabit the felt future, you often become more effective in the material steps because your physiology supports different choices and perceptions. A caution, this is not magical thinking. It is an approach that privileges internal coherence prior to action, because internal coherence increases the probability that actions will be aligned and persist. The simple teaching, stated plainly. Here is the teaching in its simplest form. Interrupt your automatic past-based pattern. Move your attention into a rehearsed future. Feel the emotion of that future as if it were present. Sustain that state long enough for your biology to begin recalibrating. That's it in one sentence. The rest of our conversation will unpack what those words mean in practice and offer a set of time-boxed practices you can try. We will also explore the science that suggests these moves are plausible, some illustrative cases from our work, and how to integrate this into a daily life that still requires paying bills and responding to real challenges. If this idea resonates, try a small experiment right now. Commit to a 9-minute practice after this block. The audio-guided version is available in the description. Give yourself permission to be skeptical and to test it empirically. This is not an all-or-nothing vow. It is a measurable experiment with your attention and body. What gets in the way? Emotional addiction and body memory. To understand why change is difficult, we need to look at how the body learns. Memory is not just a cognitive record. Memory is chemistry. When an emotion recurs, specific neurotransmitters and hormones are released. Over time, receptors and neural networks adjust to expect that chemistry. The body becomes a living archive of experiences. When you attempt to shift to a different pattern, your mind may be willing, but your body can resist. It may feel like anxiety, restlessness, or a fog of fatigue.
These sensations are not moral failings. They are the body's way of protesting newness. It prefers predictability. In other words, discomfort is a sign that the system is recognizing change and attempting to maintain homeostasis. This is precisely why sustained rehearsal matters. A single episode of imagining a future rarely changes the archive. Repetition in the context of coherent states is required. Neuroplasticity is real, but it is not instantaneous.
The body needs repeated reasons to reallocate its resources. Think of it as convincing a committee of cells and circuits that it's safe to operate differently. Practical anatomy of an interruption. An interruption has multiple components. It begins with awareness, noticing the automatic thought and its emotional tone. Then there is a physiological reset, a breath pattern that downregulates high beta arousal and invites alpha-theta receptivity. Next comes reorientation, moving attention to the heart center, evoking an embodied feeling associated with the desired future. Finally, practice, sustained rehearsal that pairs the imagined scenario with the felt state, not the other way around. Each step is trainable. The skill is learning to catch the loop early and perform a short, reliable sequence that moves you into a different internal climate. Over time, the catching itself becomes automatic. You develop a new reflex. A conversational interruption. The curious friend asks, "Listener, that sounds fine in theory, but how do you shift when you're in the middle of a work crisis or when fear is pounding?" Teacher, good question. The model is designed for both micro moments and longer sessions. In a crisis, the goal is not to conjure elaborate visions. You just need a tiny break, one long exhalation, a slowed inhalation, a 2 to 3 breath pattern that moves the nervous system out of the high beta loop. Name the emotion internally. I notice fear, and allow the naming to create a sliver of distance. Then, if possible, offer a single stabilizing image, your future self handling this with calm, or the chest-open sensation of being seen. Small interrupts compound across the day. The teacher's tone here is neither flippant nor absolutist. It's practical, interventions that are small enough to apply in the midst of life, and systematic enough to accumulate. First illustrative anecdote, a future self moment by the fire. Let me tell one condensed story that illustrates the practice. A woman had lived for years with a quiet, recurring dread that she would never be seen for her work. She tried strategies, networking, courses, but the internal knot remained. In a retreat setting, she was asked to imagine in precise sensory detail a version of herself 5 years from now, who had achieved not only professional recognition, but also a particular equanimity. She did not start with outcomes like an award. She began with posture, shoulders softened, voice steady, a particular way of smiling that allowed eyes to rest. She rehearsed that posture while sustaining the heart feeling of gratitude for the path she had taken. Over weeks of practice, the nervous system began to register that posture and feeling as available. She started making different choices, holding longer in conversations, offering ideas without the old tremor. Opportunities aligned differently. This is not evidence that imagination always manufactures external events. It is evidence that rehearsed inner states scaffold different behaviors and perceptions, increasing the chance that outer circumstances will change. This story is illustrative, not declarative. It shows a pattern that many people report when they intentionally combine attention, heart coherence, and rehearsal. The science voice, what our observations suggest. In the research context that informed this teaching, we've observed trends rather than definitive certainties. Rehearsal in coherent states correlates with shifts in autonomic markers, with changes in gene expression trends in some cohorts, and with shifts in subjective well-being. Random event generator experiments and other group coherent studies have demonstrated emergent ordering that appears associated with focused collective attention, though these effects are subtle and require careful replication. In short, there are measurable signals that align with the practices we describe, but the relationship is probabilistic, not absolute. I will return to specific study vignettes later, but the practical consequence for you is simple. Treat this as an empirical method. Test it with rigor. Measure your sleep, mood, choices, and the small objective outcomes you care about. Keep in mind that correlation is not causation in any single case, but patterns across many participants can suggest the reality of a mechanism. A practical anatomy, the 3-minute settle. Before we build the full practice, learn to settle in 3 minutes. This micro-skill is the foundation. First minute, ground the breath. Find a natural, slow rhythm. Inhale gently through the nose for 3 to 4 seconds. Exhale for 4 to 6 seconds. Allow the exhale to be slightly longer than the inhale. Keep the throat relaxed. Second minute, shift attention to the heart. Soften your chest. Imagine a gentle light or tone in the center of your breastbone.
Begin to evoke a mild, sincere emotion. Gratitude, appreciation, a warmth for something small that is already present. Do not force dramatic ceilings. Aim for authenticity. Third minute, expand attention upward. Allow your awareness to move toward the crown of the head without straining. Imagine attention like a thread rising through the spinal column, but keep the heart feeling steady. Notice any sensations, a subtle heightening, a sense of space, a lightness. This brief sequence reduces reactivity and opens the window into imagination. This 3-minute settle is not a complete practice in itself, though it is powerful. It prepares the system to enter the more extended rehearsal that rewrites habit. Learn to apply it before any short visualization or decision-making moment. Troubleshooting the settle. Common difficulties. The breath feels tight. The heart feeling feels contrived. The mind races. If the breath feels tight, return to a breath that feels safe. No force.
If the heart feeling seems fake, look for a small thing that genuinely evokes warmth. A pet, a particular sunrise, a memory of kindness, rather than trying to manufacture grand emotions. If the mind races, name the dominant thought and return to the breath. Naming interrupts the automaticity without judgment. Practice is practice. It will feel awkward at first. Expect resistance. Expect the body's homeostatic nudges. These are not failures, they are data. A pause in the logic. Why rehearsal matters instead of wishful thinking. Rehearsal differs from wishful thinking in 3 ways. First, rehearsal sets a physiological context before you call for outcomes. You are not merely saying you want something, you are training the body to feel it now. Second, rehearsal is sustained and consistent. A single mental wish is noise. Repeated, focused practice creates patterns that the nervous system notices. Third, rehearsal emphasizes feeling more than detail. Imagery is useful, but feeling is the more potent variable because it is the chemistry the body records. Think of it like tuning an instrument. You do not merely request a note, you tune the instrument and play it repeatedly. The organism is the instrument, the rehearsal is the tuning. An initial step into practice, the 9-minute experiment. Because this teaching values experimentation, here is a complete, time-boxed 9-minute practice you can try after this block. If you committed earlier to the description link, use that audio. If not, you can follow these cues mentally. Minute 0 to 3, the 3-minute settle described above. Minute 3 to 6, heart focus and emotional evocation. Bring to mind a future scenario you genuinely desire, not a full script of outcomes, but the felt state, steady, grateful, clear. Let that emotion be primary. Minute 6 to 9, future self-visualization. Imagine yourself inhabiting that emotional tone in a simple scene, perhaps speaking calmly in a meeting, waking in the morning feeling steady, or moving through your day without the old reactive knot. Keep sensations vivid but not theatrical. Emphasize the felt body state over the details. End gently, take a breath and notice any shift. Record 2 observations, one about your felt state and one about any small behavioral impulse you sense. This is your baseline data. A reminder, this is an experiment. If you have a serious medical or psychiatric condition, consult a clinician before attempting breath practices that change autonomic tone. Many ganchos, signals that keep attention. As you prepare to continue with deeper mechanics and stories, hold these lines to yourself. They are repeatable anchors that will appear again. You are not your past, you are the attention you bring to the future. Create from wholeness, not from lack. The body learns by repetition. Feel first, act second. These aphorisms are simple because simplicity aids memory and practice.
Where we will go next. We will next unpack the subtle mechanics of the pineal CSF interaction, the role of gamma coherence and integration, and a set of extended practices that build the 9-minute experiment into a daily structure. We will also examine several concise case studies from retreat work and controlled experiments, always with careful hedging. The future person you intend to be, unfamiliar, alive with possibility. Crossing requires a bridge, and that bridge is the repeated practice of felt future states. The water will pull, currents of memory and chemistry will tug at you. For a time, sometimes weeks, sometimes months, you inhabit neither bank fully. This is the strange vacuum we call transformation. In that vacuum, 2 things are essential. First, patience with your biology. It will not flip like a switch. Second, a consistent rehearsal. The bridge is built 1 plank at a time. The more you practice coherent attention and sustained feeling, the more robust the bridge becomes. Tension remains. What does the body demand? Some will ask, if this is so powerful, why does the body resist? The answer is simple and sympathetic. The body operates on safety. Novelty often reads as threat. Emotionally, old patterns feel familiar, even when they cause suffering. Biologically, neural circuits and receptor patterns represent investments of energy. Change requires a reallocation of resources. The system asks for proof that the new pattern is stable. That proof is not intellectual belief. It is repeated physiological experience. This is why the teaching prioritizes feeling rehearsal over rote affirmation. Feelings change receptors. Rehearsal instructs cellular committees to adopt new defaults. A final note for this section. At this point, you have a model, a short experiment you can try now, and an appreciation of what will resist you. The remainder of this teaching will provide deeper practices, scientific context, and illustrative cases. We will explore how to scale individual practice into collective coherence, and how immersion, retreat-style intensity, can accelerate change. But before we step into those waters, take the 9-minute experiment. Try it and note what shifts. Keep a simple journal. Today's date, 3-minute settle notes, 1 sentence about the felt future, and 1 observed impulse during the day. When you return, we will examine the inner mechanics more closely, the brainwave ladder and how to intentionally move between its rungs, the safe, practical ways to engage pineal CSF dynamics, and the sequences that reliably place practitioners in states conducive to rewiring memory.
We will also tell concise stories from groups who have practiced together, examples of emergent ordering and surprising shifts, always framed as trends, not guarantees. The crossing is a process, not an event. The invitation stands. Test this method like a scientist tests a hypothesis. Observe, record, and iterate. The teaching is simple. The work is persistent. Keep curiosity close. When you return, the next step is to map the terrain where change actually happens. If the 3-minute settle is the doorway, then the following sections are the map of the house. The brainwave ladder you'll climb, the physiology you'll nudge, the rehearsal scripts you'll run, and the social containers that amplify the work. We will move carefully, mechanistic where we can, metaphorical where we must, and always practical. Theory, the brainwave ladder and why it matters. Think of brain rhythms as doors with different hinges. Each rhythm doesn't lock you in, it simply favors certain processes. High beta is the doing rhythm, focused attention, problem solving, quick reactivity. Useful for urgent tasks, poor for imaginative rehearsal. Alpha and theta open doors to inner images, memory reconsolidation, and suggestion. Gamma is a state of binding, disparate networks talking coherently, often reported during moments of insight or deep integration. Delta is restorative and reorganizing. Why does this matter for practice? Because training attention is not merely a metaphorical shift, it is a change in which networks are dominant. When you intentionally lower high beta and invite alpha theta qualities, you increase the brain's receptivity to new patterns. That's the window where imagination changes the likelihood landscape. Practicing well in a receptive rhythm tills the ground where new habits can take root. Practical correlates of each rung. High beta, 13 to 40 plus hertz. Alert focus, stress. Use for planning and execution, but avoid rehearsals here. Alpha, 8 to 12 hertz. Relaxed wakefulness, creative ease. Good for brief imaginative rehearsal and consolidation. Theta, 4 to 8 hertz. Deep imagination, memory integration. Useful for guided visualization and reconsolidation tasks. Gamma, 30 to 100 hertz, fast bursts, network integration, insight, appears when multiple brain systems cooperate, often correlated with sustained heart coherent states combined with intense attention. Delta, less than 4 hertz, deep sleep, restorative processes, indirectly necessary for biological integration of change. The bridge you build is not about spending all your time in theta, it's about accessing receptive rhythms long enough and often enough to tilt the habitual set point of the nervous system. Think of it as moving the center of gravity of your attentional life. Practical note, you do not need an EEG to practice. The cues we provide, breath pacing, heart focus, and sustained feeling, are behavioral tools that tend to move the nervous system in predictable directions. If you have access to biofeedback, HRV monitors, consumer EEGs, they can be useful for feedback, but they are not required. Heart coherence in practical terms. Heart coherence is a measurable ordering of the beat-to-beat interval pattern. When the heart's rhythm becomes more ordered, the vagal system stabilizes, and communication between heart and brain favors regulation over reactive oscillation. Practically, generating gratitude, appreciation, or calm acceptance in the chest for a sustained period increases coherence. How to practice heart focus safely and effectively. Find your heart area, the center of your chest near the sternum. Breathe gently, allowing the exhale to be slightly longer than the inhale. Recall a specific, small item that genuinely evokes warmth, a small kindness, a pet, a late afternoon light, rather than an abstract idea. Hold that feeling in your chest for a period of time. The feeling should be sincere and sustainable, not strained. Combine the heart feeling with soft, open attention upward. Keep the breath even. When this practice is paired with a receptive breath and an upward orientation of attention, you create a physiological climate that supports integration across neural networks. Pineal, CSF mechanics, and safe attention upward. When teachers describe attention moving to the crown or a pineal opening, they are offering a shorthand for several related phenomena: an upward shift in attention, a subtle change in cranial tone and breath pattern, and a felt increase in spaciousness. The pineal sits in a fluid environment. Cerebrospinal fluid pulsations change with breath and posture. Certain breath patterns, slow, diaphragmatic, with a gentle extension of the exhale, can alter intracranial fluid rhythms enough that many practitioners report a noticeable change in headspace sensation. A safe incremental practice for upward attention. Start from the 3-minute settle: breath, heart, crown expansion. Add a gentle expansion of the exhale. Inhale 3 to 4 seconds, exhale 5 to 6 seconds. Do not force long holds. As you exhale, imagine a slight lift of attention up the spine, as if a thread is guiding your awareness gently toward the crown. Keep the heart feeling active. The upward movement should be anchored by the chest warmth. If you notice dizziness, pressure, or discomfort, return immediately to normal breathing and ground attention in the body. Safety and ethics note: breathing patterns that dramatically alter blood gases or involve prolonged breath holding are not recommended without supervision. If you have cardiovascular, pulmonary, or neurological conditions, consult a clinician before attempting breath practices that intentionally change autonomic tone. Field versus particle: what to do in practice. When you create from the field, you begin with pattern and feeling. The field is the wave, matter is the particle that arranges later.
The practical corollary is this sequence: state before strategy. Do the internal work first: settle, heart, future feel. Then let planning and action flow from that new internal state. This does not mean you abandon planning. Rather, you seed physiological support that makes aligned plans more likely to persist. Guided practice: an expanded suite of time-boxed scripts. Below are a set of audio-friendly practices you can use immediately. Each includes time boxes, cues, and troubleshooting tips. Use them as standalone routines or combine them across the day. Practice A: the 20-minute integration, daily core. 0 to 3 minutes, the 3-minute settle. 3 to 6 minutes, deepen heart coherence. Evoke a small, sincere feeling and sustain it. 6 to 12 minutes, pineal CSF soft lift. Maintain the heart tone and gently lift attention upward. Allow images of a simple future scene to appear. 12 to 18 minutes, future self-rehearsal. Imagine a short scene in which you are behaving from the new felt state. Keep sensory detail minimal and the felt body state primary. 18 to 20 minutes, grounding. Bring attention back to the body. Note 2 practical impulses: 1 small action you can take today, 1 attitude to try in a difficult moment. Troubleshooting: if the future scene becomes anxious or desperate, return to heart feeling and lower the visual detail. If attention wanders, name the distraction and return to breath. Practice B: the 45-minute immersive, retreat-style single session. 0 to 10 minutes, settling sequence, gradually lengthening the exhale. 10 to 25 minutes, heart-sustained state plus pineal lift. Work here with steady breath and sustained heart feeling. 25 to 40 minutes, detailed future rehearsal. Walk through a 3 to 4 minute scene with sensory anchor points. Practice being the person in the scene for several cycles. 40 to 45 minutes, integration and writing. Journal 2 sentences, 1 about felt physiology, 1 about a tiny behavioral step. Practice C: the walking rehearsal, 10 to 15 minutes. This practice is vital for translating seated changes into life. 0 to 2 minutes. Begin with 2 minutes of breath down regulation before standing. 2 to 12 minutes. Walk at a measured pace. Sync breath to steps. Each 4 steps inhale, 6 steps exhale. Maintain a soft heart feeling and occasionally lift attention to a simple future image, meeting with calm, a steady email response, a centered conversation. 12 to 15 minutes. Stop, ground, and notice single behavioral impulse to follow through. Practice D: the trigger script micro practice, 2 to 5 minutes. Use this in the midst of reactivity. 0 to 30 seconds. Name the emotion silently. I notice anger, I notice fear. 30 to 90 seconds. 3 controlled breaths. Inhale 3-4 seconds, exhale 5-6 seconds. 90 to 150 seconds. Offer a small stabilizing image. I see myself responding with steadiness. Hold a minimal heart tone. And take 1 action. Soften shoulders, lower voice, step outside for air.
Practice E, the Group Coherence Protocol, for small groups, designed for groups of 5 to 30, used in retreats or community practice. 0 to 5 minutes, individual settling, 3-minute settle. 5 to 12 minutes, shared heart focus. Leader offers an anchor word or image. Each person sustains a heart tone. 12 to 20 minutes, shared future rehearsal. Each person holds an intention silently while maintaining coherence. 20 to 25 minutes, quiet observation and journaling. Group then shares one sentence about somatic shifts. Safety note: if the group contains people with trauma histories, include trauma-informed ground rules, offer the option to opt out at any moment, and provide calming resources. 7-day intensive model. Why immersion accelerates change. An intensive retreat concentrates practice and reduces the friction of daily life. The concentrated repetition gives the nervous system repeated opportunities to experience the future feel and begin allocating new resources. Here is a pragmatic 7-day model usable by small groups or personal intensives. Principles: daily structure, variety of practice modes, seated, walking, dyadic, and scheduled integration time, sleep, light movement, journaling. Each day centers on a theme. Day 1, orientation and settling, grounding, introduction to 3-minute settle, baseline measures, sleep, mood, basic HRV if available. Day 2, heart and feel, extended heart coherence practice, simple group coherence exercises. Day 3, imagery and future self-work, detailed rehearsals with coaching on sensory anchors and posture. Day 4, pineal and upward attention, safe CSF pineal practice, gentle cranial alignment, extended resting periods. Day 5, integration through movement, walking meditations, mindful action sequences, rehearsal during chores. Day 6, collective experiment, group coherence protocol tied to a benign observable target, e.g. synchronized breathing and its correlation to a simple environmental measure. Day 7, consolidation and plan, review, create a sustainable daily practice, and a 30-day small step plan for integration. Why this accelerates change. Intense repetition within regulated autonomic states provides more frequent windows where the body experiences the new pattern. The social container amplifies motivation, models behavior, and can produce emergent coherence that supports individuals. Evidence and case stories. Illustrative vignettes, hedged. We now turn to several illustrative cases and small experiments that suggest what is possible. These are presented as trends and examples, not proofs. They are included to illuminate mechanisms and to model how to design reliable practice and measurement. Vignette 1, Future Self by the Fire, expanded. A participant arrived at a retreat carrying a long-standing sense of professional invisibility. Over 5 days of integrated practice, heart coherence, future state rehearsal, and walking meditations, she reported a qualitative shift in her felt baseline.
She began to notice different impulses, speaking longer in meetings, submitting a manuscript she had shelved, seeking conversations with 3 specific people. Over 3 months, those impulses correlated with new opportunities. This vignette highlights the pathway. Consistent internal rehearsal leads to different behaviors. Different behaviors change the odds of different external outcomes. Vignette 2, Group Coherence and Emergent Ordering, Robot Chick and RNG Analog. In controlled group experiments, collections of focused participants have produced small but statistically detectable deviations in randomized systems compared to baseline. One example frequently recounted in practice contexts involves a robotic system reacting differently in the presence of heart-coherent groups versus control conditions. Another line of experiments uses random event generators, REGs, and finds small deviations associated with collective intent. These effects are subtle, require large samples to confirm, and are best read as evidence of emergent ordering under specific conditions, rather than proof of supernatural causation. Vignette 3, Gene/protein trends, hedged. In cohort studies where participants practice sustained heart-coherent and meditation-based protocols, researchers have sometimes observed trends in the expression of specific gene pathways and protein markers related to inflammation and recovery. For instance, a small set of participants showed shifts in markers associated with immune regulation. These are exploratory findings and must be treated with caution. They suggest biological plasticity is influenced by psychophysiological states, but they do not establish causality or guarantees. Any medical interpretation should be made in consultation with clinicians and based on rigorous, peer-reviewed evidence. Vignette 4, Spontaneous Remissions and Sustained Transformations, careful framing. Among retreat participants and longer-term practitioners, there are rare reports of unexpectedly rapid health improvements or remissions. These accounts are compelling and often accompanied by changes in lifestyle, clinical care, and additional factors. They cannot be presented as predictable outcomes. They are, however, powerful narratives that motivate further study.
The important takeaway is not that practice will cure. It is that practice can create a physiological climate that sometimes supports recovery when combined with appropriate medical care. A scientist's guide to measuring your experiment. If you treat this method as an experiment, collect baseline and follow-up data. Useful measures include sleep quality, subjective scale or devices, mood ratings, daily brief surveys, 1 to 10, stress reactivity, subjective, optionally HRV if available, 1 or 2 objective behavioral outcomes, number of job applications completed, calls made, time spent on a creative project.
A short daily journal. Date, practice time, felt state, 1 to 10, 1 action taken. Measure for at least 30 days to observe trends. Small variations will occur. Look for consistent directional change. If you have access to physiological measurement, HRV, wearable sleep tracking, use those as additional signals, but do not overinterpret single readings. Extended scripts, future self-rehearsal, detailed, usable text. Use the script in the 5 to 10 minute visualization window. Speak or read it slowly, pausing naturally between paragraphs. Begin by softening breath. Imagine, not a fantasy, but a likely next step of yourself, someone you can plausibly be in 3 months to 2 years. See posture first. How does your spine set? What expression rests on your face? Notice the level of tension in the jaw. Now, feel the emotion that person carries. Is it steady confidence? Quiet gratitude? A practical calm? Let that feeling fill the chest. Notice how the breathing rhythm changes when you carry that feeling. Place one concrete small scene around this person. A short interaction, a morning routine, a simple meeting. Keep sensory details minimal. The light on the desk, the sound of a confident voice, the texture of the morning. Let the felt body state be the center. Hold this scene for several cycles of breath. If your mind wanders, bring it back to the heart tone. When the time ends, notice 2 impulses. 1 tiny action you could take today, 1 attitude to try in a difficult moment. Carry them forward. Daily integration. Micro habits that translate practice into life. Practice translates when you pair internal rehearsal with small, concrete external acts. Examples. Before a meeting, 90 seconds of settle and a short heart tone. Before calling someone difficult, 1 minute of breathing and holding the image of a composed voice. At lunchtime, 10-minute walking rehearsal to consolidate morning gains. Make these micro habits realistic. The bridge is maintained by frequency, not drama. Troubleshooting common obstacles and resistance. Resistance is expected. The body prefers known chemistry. Below are common problems and practical solutions. Problem: I feel worse after practice, anxious or hollow. Response: you may be experiencing a vacuum where habitual chemistry is less available. Ground with movement, hydration, and a short physical action. Walk, water, simple stretching. Shorten practice length for a few days while maintaining frequency. Problem: the future image feels fake or forced. Response: reduce visual detail and focus on one small believable quality, e.g., steadiness of breath, a calm tone of voice. Use tiny true anchors, a memory of a moment you did feel slightly different, rather than creating an imagined bigger-than-real scene. Problem: no external changes after weeks of practice. Recheck behavior linkages. Are internal states leading to different small actions?
Sometimes the internal shift is present but not translated into new behaviors. Identify one tiny behavioral experiment to conduct daily and record results. Problem: I have a health condition and worry about breath practice. Response: consult your clinician. Use low-intensity breath practices, avoid breath retention or forced hyperventilation. Emphasize heart feel and short, safe breath ratios. Q&A. Common queries answered. Q. Will this work for everyone? A. No method universally works for everyone. The practice increases probabilities by changing the internal climate, but outcomes depend on skillful application, context, and many external variables. Q. How long until I notice change? Some people notice subtle shifts in mood and impulse within days. Deeper integration often takes weeks to months. Longitudinal practice and measurement matter more than single sessions. Q. Can intention alone change biology? Intention shapes attention, and attention shapes physiology. The causal chain is not mystical. It traverses neural, autonomic, endocrine, and behavioral systems. Yet intention alone is not a guaranteed lever. It is part of a system that includes action, context, and biology. Q. Do I need a retreat to get results? Retreats accelerate learning through concentrated repetition and reduced life friction, but consistent daily practice in ordinary life is also powerful. Retreats are catalysts, not prerequisites. Q. How should I integrate this with therapy or medical care? Use practices as complementary supports. Always consult your medical and mental health providers regarding major treatment decisions. These practices can enhance regulation and resilience, but are not substitutes for clinically indicated care. Group coherence, designing safe ethical experiments. If you run collective coherence experiments, follow clear ethical and methodological guidelines. Keep intentions benign and consensual. Use clearly measurable neutral targets, such as a synchronized pendulum reading, a simple environmental variable. Collect baseline data and control conditions. Report findings with humility and transparency, noting sample sizes, methods, and limitations. Collective practice is powerful not because it exerts supernatural control, but because coordinated attention produces stronger, more sustained physiological states across participants. This can amplify behavior change and social support. A reproducible daily structure, a 30-day plan. If you want a pragmatic 30-day integration, use this scaffold. Week 1, Foundations, daily 9-minute practice, 3-minute settle, 3-minute heart, 3-minute future. Week 2, Expand practice, add 2 walking rehearsals and 1 20-minute integration. Week 3, Embody translation, introduce trigger scripts and microhabits before key tasks. Week 4, Consolidation, pick one behavior change and use the practice to support it, measure outcomes and adjust.
Keep a simple journal. Date, practice, felt state, one small action. Review weekly. Annex, technical primer for curious minds. Neuroplasticity. Repeated activation of networks strengthens synaptic connections through well-understood mechanisms, LTP-LTD. Emotional valence and autonomic state modulate the likelihood of reconsolidation. This provides a plausible route for how rehearsal in a regulated state can influence long-term tendencies. Heart-brain communication. The afferent signals from the heart via the vagus nerve and baroreceptors influence cortical processing. Heart rate variability, HRV, is an index of regulatory capacity. Coherent HRV patterns correlate with improved emotional regulation in many studies. Gamma coherence. Episodes of high cross-network synchrony often correlate with integrative experiences. In practice, sustained heart coherence plus focused attention appears to increase the probability of larger-scale network coordination in some participants. CSF dynamics and cranial biomechanics. Breathing patterns and posture influence intracranial pressure dynamics. The relationship between CSF flow and consciousness states is an area of active research. Practice-based reports of crown sensations likely reflect subtle shifts in these dynamics, but precise mechanisms remain under study. Final case vignette, a collective shift in a retreat cohort. In one intensive cohort, participants practiced the daily core, group coherence protocols, and walking rehearsals for 7 days. Across the cohort, subjective well-being scores rose, sleep improved, and participants reported new impulses that translated into different choices after returning home. Small physiological markers also trended in the direction of improved regulation in many participants. The cohort's experience embodies the core teaching. Repeated, coherent practice changes the probability landscape. The crossing, what to do when the body fights back. Expect a period of liminal discomfort when old chemistries withdraw before the new baseline has fully settled. Plan for this. Keep practices short and frequent to avoid overwhelm. Prioritize sleep, hydration, and movement. Use grounding activities, walking, washing dishes with attention when the vacuum feels intense. Seek social support from a coach, therapist, or practice community. A short experimental protocol you can start tonight, the 30-day mini-experiment. Goal, test whether focused practice shifts felt baseline and one behavioral target. Baseline, day 0. Record sleep quality last night, mood 1 to 10, one behavioral metric, number of uninterrupted focus blocks completed, and a 1-sentence intention. Daily practice, days 1 through 30. Morning, 9-minute core, 3-minute settle, 3-minute heart, 3-minute future. Midday, 10-minute walking rehearsal or micro practice before a challenge. Evening, 10 to 20-minute integration, 20-minute version on 3 days per week. Weekly reflection. On days 7, 14, 21, and 30, write 3 sentences. Felt shifts, behavior changes, obstacles. Measurement. Track mood daily, behavioral metric daily, sleep nightly. At day 30, compare trends and decide whether to continue, adjust, or explore a longer immersive. Ethical reminders and safety. Do not cease medical treatments without consulting clinicians. Avoid breathwork that causes prolonged lightheadedness or distress. If you have trauma history, use trauma-informed support and shorter practices.
Respect individual differences. What works for one person may require adaptation for another. Closing invitation. A practical experiment, an invitation to test. This teaching is an invitation, not a promise. It offers a method to intentionally shift attention and physiology with the aim of increasing the probability of different outcomes. The simplest way to know whether it resonates for you is to try a short, time-boxed experiment and measure with curiosity. Try this tonight. Do the 9-minute experiment from earlier. 3-minute settle, 3-minute heart, 3-minute future. Record 2 brief notes, one about your felt state afterward and one small action you intend to take tomorrow. Repeat daily for 7 days and observe any shifts in impulse, mood, or small concrete behaviors. If you find this helpful and want to go deeper, consider the 30-day mini-experiment above or an immersive retreat-like week as described. Treat the work as an empirical practice. Observe, journal, iterate. Final reframe. To rewrite reality is not to rewrite physics on a whim, it is to retrain the living system that interprets and responds to experience. You are not your past patterns, you are the attention you bring to the future. Create from wholeness, plant the internal pattern first, feel into it, allow the body to learn it, then act from that new baseline. Persistence converts the unknown into a new default. If this teaching has resonated and want guided structure for the 9-minute and longer practices, or a pathway into a guided 7-day experiment, there is a link with guided audio and a structured program in the description below. Subscribe to stay connected and find resources that support sustainable integration. Be courageous in curiosity. Be gentle with your biology. Test, measure, and return to the practice. Your attention is the sculptor. Choose where to place the hand.